today we have Justin Geibel. He is a Conservation Water Quality Project Manager at the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps Watershed Program, and he's also a Lake Champlain Sea Grant Fellow. So I will pass it on to Justin, and we look forward to hearing your talk.
Great, thank you. Can everyone hear me all right? This is fantastic. I'm seeing faces. Last few I've done, it's just been a blank void. So just so you all know, I am scrolling through and watching you. Again, thank you for that introduction. Really nice to be invited here to do this. So it was interesting to be invited. I have been involved in sort of research and science in the past. I can't really claim to be a research scientist right now. So what I'm hoping to kind of present to you today is a little bit maybe different than what you have been hearing in the past and seeing. So I might take us in a kind of a different direction. So just a little bit of background for me. So I've been with VYCC for about 3 years now. Background, a bachelor's in environmental science and a master's in plant and soil, which I'll talk a little more about. And I, like you heard, am the water quality project manager and I'm kind of under the umbrella of our conservation team, but I'll describe all that. So really what I want to talk about today, I'm gonna initially just share sort of my career path with you, which I'm sure, like most people who have presented to you, they've described it as a pretty windy path, and mine is no exception to that. And then to jump in, I want to give some background about VYCC, sort of what we do, what our programs look like. And where I want to go with this is it's kind of a reflection of where our organization is kind of in our annual cycle. And I think it's a component of what I've learned a lot about in my professional career is sort of how organizations, not just nonprofits, really anywhere you'll go in your career, there's this continued effort to in planning and evaluation and evolution and the sort of the why behind the work in whatever you're doing. If it's research, if it's more people focused, it always kind of comes back to this evaluation of why you do the work and how you do it. And with VYCC, that process really takes us through a few different iterations of, we look at what we do well, we look at what we've been successful in, and then we look outward to what are the needs, what are the ways that we can have an impact on the communities that we work with and the people that we work with. And from there, it's then an evaluation of where we can do more and what we can do better. And as a sort of a seasonal organization that, a lot of our programming happens in the summer, spring and summer seasons, we have this sort of annual cycle of going through this. And this year is particularly important with how rapidly sort of our world is changing around us. So that's kind of where I want to take us. So to start with, I'll just talk a little bit about my path. I told myself I was going to limit to one slide to do this. Even that feels kind of self-indulgent. So bear with me here. I kind of did a little photo collage of what I thought represented different phases of my career. So we'll start with undergrad. I went to UVM as an undergrad and interested in environmental science. Didn't really have much direction in that. I thought I was going to learn the names of trees and bugs, and that's really all I had thought it through. And it wasn't till sophomore year, we had a guest lecture in one of my classes by a professor named John Todd. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that name. At the time I was there, he was sort of in his peak celebrity status in environmental science and design. And he'd really coined the phrase of ecological design, and in particular, a subset of living machines. I'm not sure where the copyright is with all that, but anyway. And really what one of the main precepts of ecological design and biological design that they identified was the living world is the precept for all design. So what what the whole goal was to use living biological systems to solve problems, whether that was energy or water quality or all these kind of creative ways to use and harness the power of biological systems to solve problems, which I found fascinating. It really sparked an interest for me in kind of that realm of it. Sort of the interesting part was that understanding natural systems would allow you to inform design, but also the other side to that coin is that you don't have to understand every bit of a system to make it work to solve a problem. So you can put the right pieces together and understand in an informed way how to do that. And then those natural biological systems can sort of take over and do their work. I thought that was really cool. So from there, having graduated with this sort of new inspiration in biological design, I put that all behind me, ran away from it for a while, and went to Australia to pursue my dream of playing professional soccer. I can claim mild success in that. I spent a couple of years popping around with some like second division clubs and had a great time. It was more of an excuse to travel than anything else. So the experience in the end was more about this than it was about the soccer. But overall, wouldn't take any of it back for anything. But I did find myself sort of returning to the States with a little bit of a, wanting to re-enter, re-engage with the sciencey side, where I found myself ended up being as an outdoor guide. So this is where I got my first job as a guide. So I was in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, leading trips for young folks. If anyone has worked in outdoor education at all, this might be a familiar image to you. This is a game called Ninja. It's sort of a staple of outdoor ed, especially with young folks. So that was sort of the epitome of representing my summer as a guide. So what that really instilled in me was it sort of entered into the second thread of what my interests were as a career path. It was really learning about how to facilitate experience, the people side. Being an educator and a mentor and a facilitator was really became a passion for me as well. And from there, like I said, I wanted to sort of re-enter the scientific community and I wanted to continue learning. So ended up coming back to UVM and connecting with an assistantship with a place called William H. Minor Agricultural Research Institute. It's actually straight across the lake from Burlington and in Shazy, New York. So I entered there as an environmental science research fellow in sort of the small part of the Institute's environmental science team. As an assistant, or as a research assistant, the bulk of the research that they did was in dairy science, which I didn't quite grasp when I took the assistantship. So I actually spend another image, what represents a lot of these 2 years of my research was in the dairy barn, doing a lot of cow observation studies, collecting samples from all kinds of places. I won't name them all. So really got a deep dive into both my research in nutrient management and water quality and things like that, but also a really amazing breadth of research projects that were going on in agriculture in general. So from there, graduated with what I felt was a real good balance between environmental science and education, and tried my best to put that to work in Colorado. Moved out there, continued to kind of pursue both these tracks as an educator, as well as trying to pursue sort of conservation. My main gig was a park ranger, but I worked as a consultant for charter schools to start their own outdoor ed programs. I worked as an outdoor educator in a couple different realms. This picture takes a little bit of explaining, but this was for the City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks program. They have a program that only exists there where basically your dog is allowed to be off leash on open space and mountain parks properties if you sign up and take an hour-long class and you register your dog with a little special tag. I, among a couple other educators, were the ones that taught that course. Very strange. I think safe to say this only exists in Boulder. So I claim that this is a sort of a very unique position to have had. So from there, spent 4 years in Colorado, sort of continuing to develop these skills as an educator, and moved back to Vermont to sort of put down roots. And these are two of those roots. Can't hear you all, but I'm assuming they're audible size and of how cute they are. So I'll pretend. So I ended up finding this position at VYCC, and it really, luckily for me, it kind of combines both those aspects. So I engage in a lot of the on-the-ground implementation of water quality work, as well as I am able to work closely with people. So that's my path. It's a messy slide, which I think is appropriate. So let's jump into the current day of VYCC. So who we are a nonprofit that in a nutshell, we hire, train, and put to work youth and young adults on valuable projects throughout the state. So, we hire ages from 15 to 25, 26. And the bulk of our programming is kind of split between two different sides of our organization. The first one being a food and farm program, which I'll talk a little bit about, and then the conservation side, where a lot of sort of the more maybe traditional or the work that you might picture when you think of a conservation crew, and that includes a number of different areas. So to touch on the food and farm program, this takes place mostly on our property in Richmond, Vermont. We have about 10 acres of organic vegetable production and 40 acres or so of land for grazing for chickens, pigs, and cows. Basically what our crews do in this program is they grow, harvest, and pack these vegetables for our healthcare share, which is effectively a farm to hospital program. Area hospitals prescribe these shares to, you looking at the right thing? No, there we go. They prescribe these shares to patients who have diet-related illnesses or disease, or a particularly acute lack of access to fresh produce. And our crews deliver these healthcare shares to those folks. So a really cool program. I won't talk as much about this sort of side of things, more focusing on the conservation side, but if you have any questions about how this works, feel free. I'd love to talk more about it. And from there, kind of shifting over to the conservation side of things, this may be more what you picture when you think of a conservation crew. One area of work that we do is in trails and parks restoration. So we build trails, we improve access, and we also reduce impact and help sort of maintain the infrastructure that's required. So building the trails, armoring them, reroutes, composting toilets, picnic tables, lean-to platforms, things like that. That's really what we do here. Another piece is the forestry, which is sort of new. We're entering into the second year of an agreement with the Northern Borders Regional Commission to build out a program that is meant to enhance forest health, and in addition, build a workforce around forestry and the particular realm of TSI, or timber stand improvement, which I might be able to tie back into this later on, but it's sort of one of those initiatives that we're pursuing and getting off the ground. You might know these photos, you might say, that doesn't look much like a Vermont forest, and it's not. Actually, a lot of the forestry work that we've done in the past was in North Carolina, actually. So these are some sort of satellite crews that we had operating in South Carolina. All right, and the water quality realm, that's sort of where I exist within the conservation team. The work that we focus on is quite a range, but the bulk of it is focused on erosion control and and phosphorus. So I'm sure many of you know various aspects of water quality in Vermont, but in freshwater and in Lake Champlain specifically, phosphorus is really the nutrient that we're dealing with, limiting nutrient that we're really trying to manage and get a hold of. A lot of the work that we do, like I said, is sort of stormwater related. As we change the landscape, as we change the hydrology on a landscape with impervious surface and things like that, we effectively, we're increasing and creating a lot of erosion, and phosphorus is very much bound up in that sediment and being contributed to surface water. So a lot of the work we do are sort of small scale erosion type fixes and best management practices that our crews are really well suited to sort of sprinkle across the landscape in these small scale ways and have a bigger impact on water quality that kind of get missed by a lot of the municipalities and projects that are bigger money and take kind of are more focused on. We also do a lot of riparian, so this is erosion, but also riparian habitats. There's some crews that are burying willow fascines just down from a dam that was just removed. So you have this sort of big bank of sediment that's there that during bigger storm events will wash away. So we're kind of getting in there to try to stabilize this area as much as possible. So this is just sort of to give you some examples of the type of work that we do. And in all of our conservation crews basically operate as a small crew of usually 2 crew leaders and 4 to 6 members. And in general, they're often doing a variety of work. They're not just focused on one aspect or the other, but we'll get back to that. So now shifting towards so that's the body of the work that we kind of do. Right now where we are, which we usually are seasonally, but it's sort of more acutely this year in responding to the sort of the changing landscape of Vermont and the youth and young adults we work with and the community needs. We're really focused on evaluating these programs, looking at what we can do better. Like I said, what we do well, what we can do better. And when we do that, we are really looking at this through 3 different sort of buckets or lenses. The first is the organization. What are the limiting factors? What are the constraints that we have on us? It's the nuts and bolts, the funding, where our mission is sort of taking us, and the suitability. We operate in small groups of young folks with mainly hand crews. So that's sort of the what brackets how we can operate and what programming we can run. The second is a community, and that's really what are the needs? What are the projects solve? How do they help the Vermont community? Like I said, we're looking at access and to recreation and sustainability of that recreation. We're looking at water quality and protecting those natural resources. And improving natural resources like through the forestry and timber stand improvements, things like that. So what are those needs and how are they evolving? And then the big piece, like I mentioned, which was, is to a lot of degrees, the biggest piece is the people, especially the people that we work with and we hire and we serve. What are the needs of those folks, and how do we continue to adapt to do better at helping achieving those goals? So to touch on what we do well, we've been around for 35 years. The program has changed quite a bit, but we really have a baseline of skills and of systems that work really well. Recruitment and hiring. We have learned how to recruit and hire and manage over 250 humans in a given season. It's typically a short season, so it's like boom and bust. But we have, we operate with mainly 2 different types of crews. We have our day-based crews that folks will go home at night and then show up at work that day. And then we have our camping crews. So both traditionally for youth and young adults that are out there spiking out, so to speak, that they're camping close to their work site. And we hire a whole lot of people. Another thing we do really well is the support. those crews in the field. We hire crew leaders and train them in a lot of things they need to know. We hire field supervisors who sort of oversee the handful of crews in the field and support them that way. We have project staff like myself who are really there to set up the projects, give them the tools they need and the resources, and make those projects happen. And we have at the West Monitor Barn, we have a really amazing workshop. We have lots of tools. We have lots of vans and trailers and all those things. And also communication. So all of us as a team, we're all taking on different components of this crew's work and of their life. But we all really work together to communicate every aspect of their life, their projects, their camp life, their community, leadership, logistics, and their overall learning outcomes. So we really work hard to be able to support really all the aspects of when our crews are out there. And training leadership, again, we work very closely with our crew leaders staff, and they're really the crux of the whole thing. They're there in the field leading and transferring a lot of these learning outcomes in the field. So how to use the tools properly, how to complete projects, particular job skills in those different fields, community building, all sorts of things. And overall, what we do well is we facilitate an experience. I don't know if any of you have worked with a conservation corps or been involved in sort of the corps movement. It's a difficult one. It's a kind of an intense one, but it can be and is very often transformative for a lot of people, both professionally and personally. Putting together these small groups of people to be working side by side is a really powerful thing. And that really stays central to the mission and what we do well. So to go back to this sort of evaluation process, where we continue to learn and grow is the areas of the need that changes constantly. And what we've really identified this year, particularly 2019, a lot of these things were kind of showing themselves as trends. Some of them have been exacerbated by this global pandemic and this whole shift in how the whole world operates. And there are areas in which we have been moving and are continuing to move as an organization to help meet that need, like I was talking about. So what are those kind of bigger picture areas that we're looking at in the state? One is workforce development, which I'll talk more about each one of these. Another is kind of the other side of the coin to workforce development, but is alternate career paths, especially for young adults, and exposure to career paths for youth, but really focusing on those young adults and the increasing need for alternative pathways. Another is a connection to community. So this is sort of always an aspect, but we're another area that we're really trying to continue to develop and we see as a more important need moving forward. And another one is mental health and resiliency, which I'll talk more about, but this is really an aspect that has shown itself as a really important place for us to kind of address and to make progress in. So to kind of touch on each one of those pieces, the workforce development component. So what are the problems that we see from VYCC, but looking out across the state? There are a number of industries that we work in that are both growing in size and also growing in complexity. And I'll give an example of what I mean here. And those industries have an increased need for experienced and specialized workforce to complete the goals of that particular area. So how we see VYCC kind of adapting and helping there is increasing in specialization of our crews. So like I said before, most of our crews will typically, especially young adult crews, will do quite a variety of work, which is great for helping identify interest and giving variety. But what we found is because of these needs and because of these sort of career paths that we're looking to create, specializing our crews to focus on a particular area and sector is really valuable. And to give you an example of one of those sectors, so this picture is of a rain garden that we helped build in Montpelier last year in 2019. This was a great project, and it represents a really growing component of stormwater management, and referring to it as green stormwater management, green stormwater infrastructure, or GSI. This is sort of a piece of a bunch of different technology like gravel wetlands and constructed wetlands and things that are gaining in momentum. There's a lot of support from federal and state funding, and a lot of it's a big, continuing to be a bigger component of the overall water quality solution sort of across our landscape in Vermont. What does that mean for implementation? Well, the workforce to construct and install these is one thing. There's definitely a lack there. Where there's another sort of bottleneck is the operation and maintenance and monitoring of these things. So this is new technology. We've been building them for a couple of decades. But what we've learned is that there is really not the expertise or the workforce to continue to maintain them to the degree they need to, because of the complexity, really. If you picture, so this is at the VSCCU building in Montpelier, it's a bank, and their normal landscaping sort of process is, sitting on a mower and maybe weeding a little bit. These systems really require an basic understanding of biology, of soil chemistry, of hydrology, that goes beyond what a normal sort of service provider would be able to provide. So we really see a huge opportunity for VYCC to help build this workforce. And there's a couple of other sort of examples of the sectors that we work in. This is sort of one of them that is at the forefront. And again, what that sort of will require is giving these young folks, young adults, the necessary tools and coordinating those learning outcomes that we sort of infuse in our work in the project-based experience, coordinating them with the industries, with sort of that need for the workforce. And again, the flip side of that, sort of dovetailing, is the alternative career paths that are continuing to be in higher demand for young adults. So, these are symptoms that have been sort of present in Vermont and elsewhere for years: rising costs and competitiveness of college and university programs. In the short term, exasperated by COVID-19. We're now seeing an economic recession, a rise in unemployment, and a lot of young people looking for these alternate pathways. The ways that we think we can continue to evolve and help is building a progression through our programs from youth to young adult participants, offering a more project-based, sort of more professional positions is really a big component. And this picture on the right here is sort of a way that we piloted that. The folks on either end, Demery is on the left and Joe is on the right. These were sort of our first pro crew type models, where these two both were planning to go back to school when everything went remote. They decided that wasn't for them, so they were looking for other opportunities. We were able to hire them to lead this particular area of work, which is our aquatic invasive species removal. So they were out there in the field with the help of our other crew members at times, but they were leading the charge on our water chestnut removal program. So kind of a way we envision being able to hire young folks, put them in a position to really gain on-the-job skills and develop sort of project management skills. And another component of that is coordinating those learning outcomes with education institutions. So aligning that education that they get on a project basis with what higher education, colleges, universities, training programs are trying to do already. And like I mentioned, community connection, again, as we find ourselves in an increasingly polarized sort of world. And in a more concrete example of what's happening in Vermont, many of you may have heard our demographics are sort of shifting. We are among the oldest state in the country, and it's a big push to understand how to retain young people in Vermont, how to keep them in Vermont and working here. We think we can play a role in that, and really where that comes down to is community-based programming that creates a connection to place and community. We do a bit of this, but it's an area that we really want to continue to push. And it's the limiting factor there is really the partnerships. A great example of when it works well is this picture on the left. This is our Woodstock community program that we piloted this year. So it was a partnership between Woodstock Union High School and the Marsh Billings Rockefeller State Park. So we basically were able to supplement on the days that these middle school and high school kids were not in class, in-person school. We were able to come up with this partnership to get them out working on conservation projects within the state park. So an example of how it works, when it works well, it works really well and allows us to give a really powerful place-based curriculum. So through the work, creating a connection to the place they live, and hopefully to the people that are around them, and continuing to allow them to commit their time and their resources and their energy to that community. And the final one I want to talk about was mental health and resiliency. So this is probably a great example of one of those areas where we looked at our programming, we looked at the resources we have, and we looked at what the sort of the problems and the trends were in the greater community. And we said, well, we could do a better job here, and we need to think more thoroughly through this. And like I said, the problems really are continuingly increasing rates in anxiety, depression, and mental health issues among teens and young adults. This is trends nationally and worldwide. And what is sort of, like I mentioned, our programs they're intense. It's an intense experience. So we found ourselves having to try to manage these increases in anxiety and the resources that were needed in the field, and realizing that we just didn't have them among what our current structure. So really what that outlined for us is the importance of partnerships. So we have been working with a youth and family services organization in South Burlington called Centerpoint. They have counselors, youth and family services counselors that have helped us to develop a health and wellness and resiliency program and support for our crews while they're out in the field. Another big shift, and this may not sound like much, but what we've made a decision recently to limit our youth participants to day-based programming. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but we have, over 35 years, we have hired and put onto camping crews 16 to 18-year-olds. And that is a big part of what we do. And it was a big part of learning through this process of saying, we don't think we have the resources to be able to support 16 and 17-year-olds on an immersive camping crew in the field. And so now we're focusing those positions on young adults. So that's sort of one of those big shifts that we've had to make. But again, sort of in response to the data we've been seeing and collecting. So I know that a lot of that is sort of in the weeds, but I think what it represents for our organization is sort of that continuing look and evolution of the needs that are around us, what we do, why we do it, and both supporting a lot of the stuff we do well and learning from what we don't do well. So for us, that's sort of the higher level thinking organizationally. Now what comes next for us in our phase of planning and having all those ideas of what we want to do and implement and change, it becomes a lot of this, which is sort of the fun part. It's implementing it, and it's getting these ideas and these policies and these things on the ground. And it takes a lot of coordinating, a lot of planning, a lot of discussion, a lot of nuts and bolts. And so I think maybe my takeaway for you is whatever career path, wherever it takes you, whatever sort of organization or business or research-based organization you end up in, this is the type of process that you'll inevitably go through at varying degrees to different levels of specificity. But I think this was a big learning curve for me, is to understand from someone who at some points really wanted to be just focused on the work, at other times just really wanted to be focused on the people. It's really the intersection between those two things that have to constantly be reevaluated and deconstructed and reconstructed. So that is where I'm going to leave it. I'm sure I covered a lot of ground, and I hope you're not too glazed over. I'm sure there's lots of questions. So feel free to
start reading the questions if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. Shoot.
Okay, great. So we do have a few questions. The first is, sorry, I'm scrolling down to the actual question. Can you talk more about thinking about groups like state departments, like Fish and Wildlife and Forestry? How does one go about reaching out to these groups? And I'm not sure if the question is in reference to working with them or internships or jobs, but do you have any recommendations on how to go about reaching out to these types of groups?
Yeah, well, I mean, we as at VYCC, we work pretty closely with Fish and Wildlife, Parks and Recreation, Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, a lot of these groups that are acting in the sort of the project sponsor role for us. As far as specific opportunities with them, I would say, it's sort of on a individual organizational basis. A lot of these groups have internships that they're filling throughout the year, this year being the exception. I think a lot of folks had to scale back the types of entry-level opportunities. But if there are specific sort of sectors that you're thinking about, or specific organizations that you are interested in reaching out to, I'd be happy to think through ways to sort of connect you through some of our channels. I think it just sort of depends on what kind of opportunity you're looking for. So that said, that might be, I'll have to punt to, if you have specific questions about a particular organization, you can definitely reach out to me directly, and I can kind of help you navigate where might be a place to connect with them.
Great. I'm sure there are lots of students interested in these programs now. So does VYCC do internships, or is it more hiring?
That's a great question. We mostly hire both paid positions and AmeriCorps positions. I don't know if you're all familiar with AmeriCorps, but it's not technically an employee. You're completing a service term. You get a living stipend and an education award. So a lot of the positions we hire are AmeriCorps. We do with those. Kind of what I was describing about the varying pathways that we're exploring and ways to, change our programming. We're looking at a lot of different hiring practices. For myself, the past few years, I have hired one intern to work with me in water quality. We're looking to expand, like I said, the sort of professional professional project positions. So folks that might be have a higher level education understanding in particular areas of work like forestry or water quality or recreation. So I would say stay tuned, especially over this coming winter when we start putting out a lot of our position descriptions and hiring process, because like I said, we're kind of in the process of the evaluation. So there very well might be an area of hiring or positions we bring in that are more modeled around an internship than have in the past.
And will those be through your website, or do you post them? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, bycc.org. That's really the hub of where we push a lot of these out, and you'll likely see the America positions and the pay positions coming out through, if you keep an eye on Indeed or other sort of job boards.
Great. How much does BYCC collaborate with organizations such as the Green Mountain Club?
We work very closely with the Green Mountain Club, obviously mainly in our trails and rec. We have, they hire some of their own sort of seasonal trail crews. So we often are helping them complete projects alongside their crews. We also help a lot with some of the data collection efforts that they have. We have in the past hired a few survey and inventory crews that have gone out and alongside their staff, hiked a lot of their trail network and systems and collected data on infrastructure and trail features and things like that. So to say, we work very closely with them on most of our trail infrastructure projects.
How is food grown from the healthcare share given back to the community, and how has COVID affected this process? I've heard that there is a higher demand for fresh vegetables throughout the community.
That's a great question. How food is grown from that? So we have basically two aspects to the sort of the distribution of food. The big one, like I said, is the healthcare share. So we're continuing to increase the number of partnering medical centers that we work with. I think we have 5 or 6 now across the state that have sort of partnered in this effort. So basically how it works is the folks will effectively pick up their share from the medical center that they are signed up through, and sort of regional. So just the mechanics of it, our crews will pack these individual shares on our property. They go into a bunch of different vans and trailers, and they go to these medical centers. How COVID has affected that? This program was one that was able to be a little bit, I don't want to say insulated, but because of the process, we were able to really actually increase the number of shares that we've been putting out this year. And another kind of success there is that the other piece of distribution is our farm stand, which in the past has really just been a small operation to supplement, give the opportunity to folks in the community to stop by and, buy a carton of eggs or, a squash or what have you. We've got really creative with sort of a automated farm stand system. We basically were able to create a little farm stand with an iPad there, and folks can come up and, without any interaction, they can select what they want. They can ring themselves up and they can pay right there. So actually our farm stand profits have doubled this year because a lot of folks are choosing to just use that easy option. They don't have to go to the grocery store. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but so anecdotally, we have seen an increase this year in the healthcare shares that go out. We've also seen an increase in traffic just in our farm stands.
Great. So next question is, what is a willow fascine?
Ooh, good question. A willow fascine is a bundle of willow shoots. Willow is really incredible. It resprouts like mad given the right conditions. So you may have heard of willow staking. It's basically the same idea. A willow stake, you can cut a segment and pound it into the ground and it will reshoot. A willow fascine is basically taking lots of shoots, tying them together in a big bundle, and then burying them and allowing all of those different shoots to regenerate. That works really effectively because it gives a bigger surface area, and actually the fascines themselves provide a little bit of bank stabilization just as they're put into the soil. So you're both getting a little bit of benefit for just in a a particularly erodible stream bank. You're giving a little bit of stability, just burying these bundles in the ground, and then over the course of one growing season, they can really start to regenerate and start putting down roots and start stabilizing that bank pretty quickly. So it's a really great great solution for trying to stabilize an unstable area or bank of soil quickly.
Great. Can you talk anything about a starting wage for UICC?
I can, in what we have traditionally done, again, as we're adjusting sort of the scale and scope of what we do. Typically, a crew leader will get between $13 and $15 an hour. Most of those positions are usually our hourly paid positions. With AmeriCorps, the stipend is, so most of our member positions are AmeriCorps and a stipend. In the past, they haven't been awesome. It's, I want to say $350 a week, with the incentive that when you complete your service term, depending on how long it is, there's an education award at the end of that for you that you can claim. So for longer term AmeriCorps position, that's like $2,500, $3,000 that can go towards student loans or continuing credits and things like that. There is the hope with over the next few years with a favorable administration and favorable legislation, there's the hope that there will be continuing to be more support through the AmeriCorps system that will pay a little better and be more competitive as far as a stipend and a livable sort of wage. So stay tuned. And also we try to be transparent with that on our job boards and our position descriptions. So if you have more questions and want to kind of explore what the different qualifications or what we're looking for different positions, that'd be a great place to start.
Great, very helpful. Do you perform any tasks during the winter months, or is it strictly spring through fall?
We generally are only doing project work between May and October. With the addition of some other types of program, like we're building out a program that's focused on sort of carpentry and prefabrication of things like kiosks and composting toilets and things like that. They're working with us now, as well as we have a few forestry members, a small forestry crew out there working. So it's certainly not as a rule, and it's tough in Vermont. We would love to be able to field crews longer term through the winter, farther into the fall, early in the spring. And we're looking at ways to do that. But traditionally, we're really focused on that spring, summer, and early fall season.
In what ways did COVID affect your summer work, if at all?
Oh, it did. sorry, I'm just reading the second part of that. After completing M.SC. So COVID, we started out the spring, or yeah, like everyone did, we went remote, and effectively what happened was we dialed back all of our programming to basically say we won't be hiring any positions. This year, we are going to attempt to complete enough project work to keep ourselves, the organization, afloat and keep all of our full-time staff on, which was a little bit of a obviously precarious situation. As we learned more, as we evaluated what we can and can't do, and this summer we were able to hire day-based crews. So these were actually a lot of folks that applied for crew leader positions that we didn't have crews for them to lead. So we put them into small crews, basically calling them peer crews. Like there wasn't a particular crew leader because they were all sort of qualified for that. And we really wanted to, be able to pay them and hire them. So we had four person peer crews that were out there working. They were going home at night. Through that process, we learned a lot more in what our capabilities are. And we kind of realized that camping crews would both be possible and almost from a COVID stance, easier to manage almost. You can imagine folks that are coming together to work all day and then going to their respective homes, offered some challenge. So being able to put a group together that's camping oftentimes at a closed state park or in a backcountry setting, that exposure is quite a bit lower than these day crews. So this fall, we hired another series of crews. We hired 6 crews with a more traditional model with 2 crew leaders and a handful of young adult crew members. So moving forward, we feel good about 2021 being able to field more, maybe not back to what the volume that we typically are at, but hiring and fielding both day crews and camping crews.
Great. So after completing a VYCC program, what is the next step for these young adults? Do they typically go back to school or head into the workforce?
A little bit of both, and of course being slightly different this year. A lot of the fall members and leaders that we hired that I just mentioned on those camping crews, most of them came to us having had other summer, fall employment options that due to COVID fell through. A lot of them also were either planning to return to school or were planning to start a college or university. So a lot of those folks came to us because we were, the next option that they had. So as far as, unfortunately, we can't continue to employ them through the winter. So their options, again, I think a handful of them are planning to head back to school. Some of them have some other jobs lined up. And then some of them, unfortunately, are going to be a little bit kind of stuck, looking for something else that pops up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the next question, so is there a particular group of people that your health share that are part of the health share?
That's a great question. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. So I'm trying to remember if there is more specific information like that on our website, and I don't believe there is. So what would be a good way to get you that information? Can I follow up with maybe the class website, or?
You want to send it to me? I can put it on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. And a question about training. So is training sort of worked into the program, or is there a specific amount of time for training at the beginning?
So our crew leaders go through a pretty intensive month-long training with us, and that usually begins late May into June. So that's where we, in a normal year, we bring all those 40 or so crew leaders. They come to our campus. We run workshops and facilitate trainings on community building, on leadership, on risk management and safety, technical skills for the typical types of projects they're going to be doing, how to camp and lead, and all those sort of aspects. So crew leaders will show up and they'll get that really intensive training. From there, when our crew members show up, a lot of the translation of those skills and those trainings happen in the field with their crew leaders. So we try to give the crew leaders the tools to teach a lot of this to their members. And then we have ongoing interactions where we bring crews back 1 or 2 at a time to campus. They spend a week on our campus, and we do some more trainings on, leave no trace and that kind of thing. So it's ongoing for members, really. It's sort of sprinkled throughout. For crew leaders, it's sort of a front loaded pretty heavily.
Great. During what season do you all work best in?
Do we work best in? That's a great question. In my world, in water quality, a big demand, and unfortunately we typically don't have the workforce hired at these times, are the shoulder seasons in the spring and the fall, especially in riparian planting. So you want to plant trees when it's cool and wet. Planting 2,000 trees in July, the survival rate is going to be really low. It's really hard to get those transplants established. So the term best, I would love to have, a lot of the work that I do is better accomplished between, in the spring and the fall. For all our crews, it's pretty tough being out there in the middle of the summer in August in the heat. So I'd say our productivity goes down a fair bit, around those heat waves in July and August. Does that answer the question? Is there a particular definition of best that you...
Malik, feel free to follow up with your question in the chat if we didn't quite get there. How many younger people do you usually hire in a season?
Usually, between both programs, we have upwards of 250 folks, and that's both, that's across our crew leaders, conservation members, both young adult and youth, and our farm program.
Great. And Malik, you can rewrite this question too if I'm not getting it correct. How many mental health cases? I think maybe he's asking about how, did you realize that this was something that you needed to address? How were you noticing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way that has sort of manifested itself is it's somewhat reflected in sort of the data of completion and retention of folks. How many people leave our program for various reasons? And it's not that we've seen a particular increase in the percentage of the people that we hire and the people that don't complete their term. It was really the reasons why. And a lot of it was based on the resources that folks have, especially in conservation, on the conservation program, the resources that someone has at home, they really don't have in the field as far as being able to maintain their personal health and wellness. As an example, the way that an individual deals with stress, what resources somebody uses when they're in their normal life to help deal with a stressful situation. Oftentimes they don't have that in the field. Maybe it's you play an instrument, and yeah, you can often bring a guitar and stuff out, but those types of things, access to a counselor that you normally see, or those sorts of resources often are hard to get in the field. So we started seeing evidence of that, and folks just saying like, I couldn't continue my service because of these various things that were, just insurmountable for me. So that's really where how it kind of manifested itself. It's really the anxiety and stress are really have been the big drivers for us to sort of look back at these statistics.
Yeah. What background, education, or experience is recommended for being a part of UICC?
Ooh. It varies for different levels. I'd say starting with a crew member, like a young adult crew member, which again is between 18 and 26 or so. Not much specific experience is required or necessary. I think it's a general interest in conservation work. We love to see folks come through that have an interest in environmental science or recreation, things like that. But that's not really for a crew member position is not really a requirement or necessity to have. As a crew leader, we look for both kind of two aspects. We want some experience as far as technical project work. Like we love to see folks who maybe have worked on a trail crew in the past, who maybe have some technical skills with a chainsaw or with power tools, carpentry, things like that. And then also an interest to lead, to be a mentor and to kind of facilitate an experience for individuals. So that runs the gamut. When we're thinking about field supervisors and those more support positions, that's where we're looking for more of a combination of technical skills and education and experience, sort of aligning with both the leadership and the technical skills.
Great. Is VYCC all more long-term commitment, or are there shorter-term volunteer opportunities?
That's a great question. That's one that I didn't quite touch on. I think this presentation was sort of more focused on what we're doing for the sort of the young adult side of things. The other end of that spectrum is we're looking to expand the ways that we bring in volunteers and the sort of the introductory level experiences that we offer. So those being, very short term on our farm, we have groups and folks that show up for a day or two. They come for, a week, they pop in and out. The farm is really a great way to absorb a lot of people who just want to come out and get their hands dirty for a little while. We're looking at ways to offer more of that within our conservation program. Not quite sure exactly how that all looks. And then we're also looking at those more shorter term day-based and community-based programs. So as we're able to build relationships in particular communities, that's when we hope to be able to open that up a little bit more to shorter term and volunteer type folks. So again, not a perfectly solid answer, but stay tuned because it's an area that we're looking to expand into.
Great. Does VYCC have any programs pertaining to renewable energy development?
At the moment, we do not. No. That's a great question. It's as far as renewable energy is concerned, we are looking at that as far as a campus and facilities scale. So we're currently sort of doing an audit and looking at ways that we can just increase the our own renewable energy sources and the ways that we can cut back on our sort of carbon footprint overall as an organization. Like, currently we drive really old, crappy 15 passenger vans that are by no means fuel efficient or economically efficient. So those are the types of things that we're exploring, but very early phases. So if there are any suggestions or thoughts that you have about ways that renewable energy programs could be tied in, I'd love to hear it.
Great. Why did the organization travel to North Carolina? Are there out-of-state opportunities?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And it really came from a partnership that sort of sparked, I believe it was through Fish and Wildlife, but there was a group, an alumni actually of VYCC that was in the beginning phases of starting a conservation corps in North Carolina. And we really thought it would be an interesting opportunity to help them build out their programming down there. So really the arrangement was that there was a small operation that was sort of based in North Carolina. Those leaders would come up to us and go through our crew leader training in Vermont. They would then drive back down, meet up with their crew members who we hired locally, and they'd work their season down there. So it was complicated, and it was we effectively, this organization got to a point where they could sort of take back over that area of programming and build it out enough. So we sort of handed over the reins of what we helped them get off the ground. So it was really a one-off sort of thing. Currently, we don't have any out-of-state opportunities that are tied to VYCC. We do a little bit of work in New York and New Hampshire, but that's sort of just one-off for projects. So not currently outside of the state.
Great. That looks like our last question. If anybody has any final thoughts, feel free to drop them in there. But thank you very much, Justin, for an awesome presentation. I know everybody learned a lot and hopefully learned about some great opportunities that they might want to look into for the future. So you might be hearing from some of our students.
Please feel free to reach out. So I'm going to follow up on that great question about the healthcare share. And then I'll also just give you my contact information. And
perfect. I'll put that all on Canvas for everybody to see.
Welcome to, shoot me an email.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week for our last presentation. Have a great week.